So you've decided to start a video game studio. Hopefully you've already interrogated why you want to do that and made sure that the reasons make sense. If you haven't, well, maybe you should watch the video that I released about the why of starting a video game studio. But you've done that, you've made the leap, you've decided that yes, this is the right way to go. So the next thing to ask is what? What is your studio going to look like? Right off the bat, I'm going to just tell you right now, it's not going to be a AAA studio. Basically, no one gets to start a new AAA studio these days. Effectively, at this point, they only exist within the publishing organization. And it's very unlikely that you, if you're watching this video, are someone that a publisher is going to come to and say, we like your moxie, we're going to give you $85 million to play with to start your brand new studio at a AAA quality level. So that means you're going to be starting something smaller. Even the really big indie studios, like the studios making Baldur's Gate 3, are really big beyond the reach of most people starting a new studio. They are going to have hundreds of people, and as a result, they're going to be very expensive to start. So if this is the kind of studio that you're wanting to start, how are you thinking of paying for it? Where is the money coming from when your burn rate is running in the potentially tens of millions of dollars a month? Who's paying for this studio to continue to survive? So that probably eliminates the top tier of indie. You can't do AAA, you probably can't do big indie either. So what if we flip it all the way to the other side and say we could go solo? Maybe I'll just make this game on my own. This is a really good option if you are just trying to tell a story or explore a space. If you are looking to do this as a side hustle or as a hobby, then doing it on your own is a great way to go, because the only person you have to worry about is yourself. Even if you're doing it as a career, you are very able to dial in the amount of money you are spending and how much you need to spend. You can survive on ramen if you have to. You're not having to make sure that people are feeding their families. If you have a family, make sure you have enough money to last a while until you're actually bringing money in. But solo is a good way to go if you're really trying to just explore a space. Now, you do have to interrogate the who, which will be another video, about whether or not you're capable of doing this on your own. Moving up from solo, you get into the very small indie space. So this is under 10, let's say. There are a couple of different forms of this. It could be that you and a couple of friends are just doing this together. None of you are drawing salaries. You're going to roll the dice and try to make a game on your own. Something to be aware of in that situation is that usually what happens in those kinds of passion projects is that there is a different level of passion between the different members of the team. So if you have a team of 4 people and you're going to try to put a year into making a game and really just going for it, what you might find after 6 months is one of the 4 people says, hey guys, I'm sorry, I need to get a job. I can't live like this anymore. And they leave the team and go get a job because you have no money coming in. So now you're going from a team of 4 to a team of 3. Chances are that that person was a very important leg in your dev studio table, and the whole thing might tumble over. Unlike solo, where it's just you, once you move beyond 1, there's always going to be an imbalance in commitment. Are you prepared to survive that imbalance and deal with it when someone leaves? Once you go beyond 4 or 5, you're moving into something that is more of a business, in that you're going to be hiring people and paying salaries, and now you have a burn rate. Now you're using up money on a week-to-week and month-to-month basis in order to pay people. How much money do you have? How much can you afford? How many people can you afford to bring into the studio? Small indie can still be this, under 10, like your 5 to 10 is a team where you are paying salaries, but you're still really small. And then the last is this sort of indie side, right, which is in that sort of 10 to 100 size. There's a lot of different sizes, obviously, in that scale. It's a very wide bracket. Here is where it is realistic to potentially start a larger game. But as you scale up from 10 to 20 to 30 and beyond, what you'll find is your studio starts to require structure. You are going to need an HR person. You are going to need an ops person, someone to make sure that you pay the rent on time. This can't just fall on the founders, because when you're 50 people, there is just too much of this going on. So understanding what kind of studio you are trying to make is going to really start to inform the next question, which is who do you need at your studio? And we'll talk about that in the next video. One final answer to what, and an answer that's actually used by a lot of new studios, is to start an outsourcing studio. The point of an outsourcing studio is to pay your way by working for other companies. So you take your artists and designers and programmers and you form them into a unit that can help other studios make their games, provide the extra oomph, the extra resources that they may need to get their game done. This is a very common way for new studios to form. And then the idea being, you establish these contacts, you start the money coming in, you grow your studio to a sufficient size, and then either you pivot and take everyone off to make your own game, or you start to try to do both. So you are using outsourcing to keep the lights on, and then you're growing this studio a little bit bigger and using those extra people to make the game that you want to make. One trap that often happens with outsourcing studios is that they just get stuck in outsourcing. The outsourcing pays the bills. The outsourcing makes money. And so you might have a lot of difficulty finding the ability to gather enough resources together to actually work on the project you want to work on. One way that you can get past that is to use bits and bobs of extra resources to build a pitch, and then find yourself a publishing partner who can pay you enough money to stop outsourcing and to focus entirely or mostly on your game. But if you're trying to go alone, you need to make enough from the outsourcing to pay for the extra people that you have working on the game. And then you potentially run into this cultural divide where you have outsourcing people who feel like they're being taken advantage of. They're the ones that are working on all this stuff and bringing in all the money, and then these other people get to work on this cool internal thing. So think about how you're going to deal with that. How are you going to make it so that people don't feel like they're being taken advantage of, and that people are either moving back and forth between outsourcing and internal dev, or that you give different incentives for people in the different camps, or something. At least interrogate this question. Now, this actually assumes that you're planning to make a studio that produces video games, and you're not just planning to make an outsourcing studio that remains an outsourcing studio. If that's the plan, well, then you're in pretty good shape. The only thing that you need to be clear is in your founding documents, in your discussion about yourself, make it clear that the plan is to stay an outsourcing studio. It's not that you can't change your mind later, but by stating this out loud now, you avoid any hurt feelings or assumptions from people that might join your team along the way. Once you started to arrive at what you think the studio is going to look like, now you can bounce into what kind of games are you going to make? And you're going to bounce into that and then back into the kind of studio, because the game that you're going to make is certainly going to inform the kind of studio you're going to need. Here, what I would recommend as a starting point is to really think about who you are and who is the team that you're starting to build around yourself. What tends to happen is that teams tend to make games that are similar, or at least informed by what they have familiarity with. If you are a team built entirely of people who worked at a racing studio, you might not make a racing game, but you have a very high probability of making a game that has something to do with going really fast, likely driving a vehicle really fast, because that's where you think, that's how you solve problems. Those are the gameplay systems that you're naturally going to lean into. If you come from RPGs like I do, then you have a natural inclination, like I do, to solve problems through storytelling and inventory and RPG systems, because it's just where your head goes. Don't reach too far. Understand that you're going to naturally tend to lean towards the kinds of things you have familiarity with. And that's probably for the best. If you're trying to make something that's radically different than anything that any of you have worked on before, be aware that that's going to be a struggle, that you are going to have to fight against your instincts a lot. There's potentially a great game to be had there, but at least go in with your eyes open. Answering this part of what is going to potentially push you back up into the studio type, because as you realize that actually what you need to be making is an open world RPG, you're going to realize that you're probably not doing that with a solo studio, and it's going to bouncing back and forth between these two questions is going to happen naturally. But also, in order to answer the question of the game, you need to have a better understanding about who you are and who the team is that you're building around you. And that's the next question that we're going to talk about, which is who. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We have merch now. If you're interested in picking something up, there is a shelf below this video. What kind of studio would you start if you were starting a studio? Would you go it alone? Would you try to get 100 people so you could make something big? What kind of game would you make? What is your natural inclination, and where would your attention tend to drift if not being forced into one area or another? Let me know these things down in the comments. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up, because that helps YouTube know that it's worth sharing to other people. I will see you again soon. Thank you.